Did you know that the movie Battlefield Earth is based off of the Sumerian Anunnaki story? Well, it's based off of L. Ron Hubbard's book, Battlefield Earth, which I know he's the writer of Scientology, that's based off of the Anunnaki, the Sumerian Anunnaki story. Now, so I was recently rewatching this movie, and I know, yes, it's one of the worst sci-fi movies that most people talk about when they talk about the worst sci-fi movies, but for some strange reason, I like Battlefield Earth. It was very good to me. Now, if you don't know this movie, it's a 2000 movie that came out with John Travolta and Forrest Whitaker, and those are two actors that I really like. But they were these giants. They were these giants called cyclones who were the kind of a dog-like animal race, which if you think about the Anunnaki story and many of the other ancient stories, the humanoid beings that came to Earth were always some type of animal hybrid looking creation. So anyway, so they came to Earth and they destroyed Earth in 9 minutes. In 9 minutes, they attacked and they took over Earth, right? And after they took over Earth, 1,000 years goes by. Now, why did they come to Earth? They came to Earth to conquer it so they can get gold. Sounds familiar. The Anunnaki came to Earth because they needed gold. They waged battle on Earth, but mostly against themselves. But they waged battles on Earth, and it was all for the sake of getting gold. But they were giants. They were like 15 feet tall, and so on and so forth. So much bigger than man, highly technologically advanced. So it it has those elements of the Anunnaki story in it. And then the other aspect of it is that when they come to Earth and they take over, they build a dome, which unfortunately that was the best picture of the dome that I could find online. But they built this dome, this place where only the Anunnaki could live, because outside of that dome, they would not be able to breathe our air, which in the same way, if the Anunnaki came from a different planet, planet Nibiru, they would not, Nibiru would not have been in the habitable zone, so therefore they wouldn't have an Earth-like atmosphere. They would have to have a different type atmosphere that only those beings can breathe in that atmosphere. So the cyclones had such of an atmosphere that only they couldn't breathe Earth atmosphere, so they had to create a dome. They had to, and that's what the word Edan in Sumerian means enclosure. So they created an enclosure so that they can live, because remember in your Bible it says Enki was walking in the cool of the day. In the Sumerian story it talks about how the Ninharsag and Enlil and Enki and Anu all went into a enclosure that they had in southern Africa, and they worked on man's genome, and then they sent them to the enclosure Edan in Chaldea. So each Edan had a different name based on where it was located. So the Edan in Chaldea, which meant enclosure, and that's where they were. And while they was in there, and while they was in there, of course, those stories talk about how they had created man, and then man was there to serve the gods. And in that story, man was serving the gods in the battlefield Earth to be able to provide gold for them. For now, in the movie, the gold was more for economic purposes and for some other secondary reasons. But in the Sumerian story, gold was to repair their atmosphere, but also it was used to extend their lives. But while they was on Earth, the cyclones, just like the Sumerians, needed a version of man that would be a good slave race. So what the John Travolta cyclone character did is he realized that one of the man animals, as he liked to call them, was just smart enough to figure out who was in charge, but he needed man to learn more. So in the Sumerian story, it is a simple fact that man was able to reproduce himself, and that is why Enlil kicked them out of the garden, because man would become sentient and revolt against the Anunnaki. And in the Sumerian story, there are many revolts where the humans revolted against the Anunnaki. In the Bible version, it is man was forbidden from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because if man was able to gain that knowledge, then man would not keep worshiping this god Yahweh, or Enlil in this case. So the movie Battlefield Earth played it up as he saw that man was smart enough to know who's in charge, but he needed man to be smart enough to be able to mine gold, because he didn't think man was that smart. So he connected man to a learning machine. so that he can go and get more gold for him and smelt the gold. And he wound up smelting the gold and putting it in gold bars. But he wanted man to get into this learning machine so that he can learn, which kind of goes with the Sumerian story, in that the first versions of man weren't smart enough to be able to be sufficient to take care of the Anunnaki, but they knew that the ability of reproduction would be vital to that. And in the movie, it is John Travolta realizing that the main human character had a love interest, and he tried to utilize that love interest to sabotage the human's plan. But, you know, of course, the movie has many liberties that it takes and that sort of thing. And I know if you've listened to me this far, as far as this movie is concerned, you're like, you never thought about, I guarantee, because you didn't like the movie, you never thought about the fact that there are a lot of the Anunnaki story that's part of the Battlefield Earth. So if you've been waiting on an Anunnaki movie, and I think that they have made other movies called Anunnaki, but if you've been waiting, if you was in 2000 and you was looking for one, Battlefield Earth pretty much was an Anunnaki movie. And I'm sure there are some other aspects of it that go with the Sumerian story that I'm not mentioning right now. But if I am, tell me in the comments what other aspects of Battlefield Earth reminds you of the Anunnaki story, and then you know how the Anunnaki story becomes your Genesis story. So y'all have a great day, and remember always, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.